Hello, and welcome to the Classical Guitar Heroines podcast.
Join us as we celebrate the remarkable contributions of women to this timeless art form, featuring insightful interviews, captivating stories, and performances that showcase their talent and dedication.
I'm your host, Bridget Gerard, classical guitarist and member of the Kitchener-Waterloo Guitar Orchestra.
And I am your host, Mariette Stevenson, founder, music director, and conductor of the Kitchener-Waterloo Guitar Orchestra, and professor of guitar at Wilfrid Laurier University and the University of Waterloo.
We are excited to bring you the lives and music of these classical guitar heroines, past and present, and to share with you their enduring impact on music and our world. Welcome to the Classical Guitar Heroines podcast. Our guest today is Kristina Avila, composer and classical guitarist. Every now and then we hear from a listener who wants to shine a light on a classical guitar heroine the world should know about. One such artist is Kristina Avila, a name that deserves more recognition and admiration, and we are happy to have her as a guest on this episode. Kristina Avila is a classical guitarist and composer from Texas, holding a Bachelor of Music in Classical Guitar from the University of Texas at Brownsville, now the University of Texas at Rio Grande Valley. Her teachers include Dr. Michael Quantz, Dr. Jonathan Dotson, and Dr. Chad Ibsen. Kristina's compositions blend classical and jazz influences shaped by her jazz studies with Clay Moore and composition coaching from Johannes Mueller. Her guitar quartet, Koi Out to Sea, won first prize in the 2013 Austin Classical Guitar Society's statewide composition competition and was premiered by a 90-piece guitar orchestra. Her solo piece, Vincent's Night, was premiered by Thalys Smith and featured on NPR's Classical Guitar Alive, and BBC Radio 3's In Tune, performed by Kristen Walagora. In 2022, Kristina was featured on the international bilingual music podcast, Music in Two Flavors, Musica en Dos Sabores. Her work is recognized internationally with listings in the Archive Frau und Musik in Germany and the Donné Big List of Women Composers in the UK.
Kristina, thank you so much for joining us on the Classical Guitar Heroines podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure. Now, before we start delving into your beautiful compositions, could you tell us about what brought you to the guitar and when you started playing?
I was about 10 years old, and I remember watching a live performance of someone playing. I can't remember for the life of me when exactly or where it was. It was just in my hometown in a restaurant, and it was a man singing and playing kind of like mariachi ballads, but by himself. And I remember watching him and thinking, how does he know where his fingers are supposed to go? And I started to pay attention to all the other times I'd see guitar playing, like in person, on TV, and how much I'd think I also want to know where I'm supposed to know where my fingers are supposed to go and how it makes all these different sounds. And curiosity got the best of me until I got a guitar for Christmas that year. And then I started having guitar lessons after that. And I started learning different rock songs and Latin rock songs that were popular on the radio at the time until I heard a recording of Asturias Leyenda on the internet. And that was it. I was done. I was captured for life.
That's fantastic. Leander always gets so many people, interested in guitar. It's such a fantastic piece. And I was wondering, how did you get interested then in composing?
In college, believe it or not, when I first joined the guitar ensemble and the guitar program at the University of Texas at Brownsville, or UTB, it was the first time truly that I was introduced to like classical pieces, but also the more modern pieces. And so instead of just playing Sor, Caruli, or Carcassi and practicing to get into the program, it was like passing through the door and then getting introduced to living composers on the instrument and actually playing their pieces. And it inspired me to actually see what I could do and see the different things that could be done on guitar and see if I could put them together myself. And so it also introduced me to exploring more of what the different sounds that it could make and the different pieces that are capturing that on paper, and people are able to play them around the world and hear the guitar is not just lyrical, it's also not harmony, but it's also a lot of other things.
That's fantastic. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your creative process when it comes to composition.
It's a little bit tricky to describe. I thought really long and hard about that question, but it comes down to two things, I think. The first one is I'm inspired by an idea and I try to expand on the idea. And it can be anything. It can be a person, like in Vincent's Night, or it can be an object, like a koi fish, or a place, like La Isla. And I try to expand on it and imagine if they could have a distinct sound, what would they sound like? Or their emotions, what would their emotions sound like? At other times, it's the opposite, and I'm creating or playing on my guitar or even on my piano sometimes, and I'm noodling and something comes out, and I think that's what I imagine this person or this story or this object would sound like. And in both ways, I try to expand on it. But after I'm able to actually cross that barrier and keep expanding on it, one of the things that I really focus on is, especially in ensemble music, is something that's very important to me. And I try to do this in every single piece that I write that involves two or more players. And it's where I try to make sure that each part or each player feels and sounds equally important. UTB was very focused on playing a lot of ensemble music and playing as a guitar orchestra. And so I got to play a lot of ensemble pieces and experience how it's written in different ways on the page. But one thing that I noticed after playing so much ensemble music is that it follows the standard of the string ensemble, which is a tendency to keep guitar part one having the melody and guitar part four having the bass, and the parts in between have the harmony. And I feel like string ensembles can follow this pretty well because they're different instruments. So if you want the main melody to always be the instrument with the highest range, that would be the violin or violin one, and then it can work. But why are we following this for ensembles that have nothing but guitar in it? It's the same instrument in each part. And so that also allows me to keep that in mind as I'm writing, and it influences what parts are going to have what, which part is going to have the melody, and if it's going to be the bass, is it going to be something that's really melodic, or is it something that's going to be a little bit more like harmony? And even though this doesn't happen all the time, it's pretty much the standard in string ensemble order. And writing for like guitar ensembles, I really feel it's important to mix it up a bit and make sure that each part has its moment in the spotlight. So guitar one can be the bass, and that should be no problem. And guitar four can have the melody from time to time, and even guitar two and guitar three. And the audience or the listener won't really hear it, but in my experience, I've been able to hear that the sounds become a lot more blended, especially if you switch it up in the middle of the pieces. And it also, as players, forces you to work together even more because you can't predict who has the melody and who you're supposed to follow.
Right.
Now you have to follow each other as a team. It's one of my main focuses in composing because it really helps me know where I'm going to go or what part I want to have the harmony and when it's going to happen. And so once I expand on these ideas, that's the second question I ask myself: who's going to start this piece and why, and who's going to end it, and how are we going to get there?
That's incredible.
That's fantastic. Well, we will be listening to some ensemble pieces a little later, but first we're going to listen to Kristen Malagora performing Vincent's Night for solo guitar, composed by our guest, Kristina Avila.
That was Kristen Walagora performing Vincent's Night for solo guitar, composed by Kristina Avila. You are listening to the Classical Guitar Heroines podcast. You are an award-winning composer. Could you speak to us about the award that you are the most proud of?
The first one, which would be that 2013 Austin Classical Guitar Society's composition competition. And it was mostly because Austin Classical Guitar was, and it still is, I consider it to be a very prominent guitar community, not only in like the city of Austin, but they do so much advocacy and outreach like within the guitar community that they're known around the United States and in different countries. And so even if it was at the time only for Texas-based composers, it felt like it was going to be a really big deal for me, and I wanted to make sure that the piece was absolutely perfect. And so before I submitted it, I listened to it over and over and over again and edited it over and over and over again. And I think there were times that I even worked well into like 3 a.m. just doing this
Oh, Lord.
because it wasn't so much like I want to win. It was more like I want them to think highly of my piece because that's the part that would mean so much to me. That it really, really meant a lot to me that they liked it so much that it did win. And so I'm really proud of that
I
one.
can understand that because it's a really beautiful piece. It's actually one of the pieces that the Kitchener-Waterloo Guitar Orchestra has recently performed for their online concert. And we wanted to actually discuss Koi Out to Sea, La Isla, and Destination Dublin. In Koi Out to Sea, you have incorporated the use of some of the extended techniques such as dedillo, strumming, and golpe on different areas of the instrument that exploit the range and the sounds that can be created on a guitar. What inspired you to use those particular techniques?
Exploring them, really. I was fascinated to see how tapping on the soundboard could be used in a piece.
Hmm.
And being introduced to that with these guitar ensemble pieces in college really opened the floodgates for that. I wanted to know
Yeah, for
more
sure.
because no one really thinks of guitar as a percussion instrument either.
Right.
But I also wanted to prove people wrong and show them, yes, it can be. There's so many things that you can do. And as you expand, your repertoire, or even just by watching different players and playing different pieces, you also learn even more what it can do. Like in Tarigas Gran Jota, like most people don't have any idea that you can imitate a snare drum by crossing two strings, and how you can also do this up on the higher
Mm.
strings as well to emulate a very like a tinny metal sound. And
Mm.
Nikita Koshkin does this in his suite, like the Princess Toys for the Tin Soldiers. And just hearing that, you automatically think of like tin soldiers, and it's really amazing that the guitar can do all these different
Right.
things. And I often wondered what else could be done and if it's ever been done or recorded or in a piece of music before. So I remember asking my classmates a lot, like, have you ever seen in a piece where strumming above the nut is used? And they would be like, I don't know, I'm not sure. Or what about tapping on the fret wire? Or what else? And it's things like that that inspired me too. Also, can it be used to represent something or imitate a different instrument or different sound? Like in Destination Dublin, where I used the timbre
Mm-hmm.
to imitate the
Mm-hmm.
Bowron drum. And so exploring those different techniques really comes a lot from that. What else can we do to imitate different sounds, but to also expand and show people and that the guitar is so much more than just lyrical things or harmony.
Right. Right. When the Kitchener Waterloo Guitar Orchestra performed Koi Out to Sea, some of the members, like me, could hear some possible rock influences, particularly in the guitar four section, bass lines. On your site, you mentioned this piece was inspired in part by the city of Austin, Texas, renowned for its musical scene. Can you chat a little bit about living in Austin and how it's influenced you?
Influenced me in a lot of ways, actually. The main reason, like, why I wanted to live here is because I fell in love with how it was so diverse. There were so many different people, variety and diversity, just like any big city. But at the same time, everyone seemed
Hmm.
connected in how they wanted their city to be. And the Keep Austin Weird vibe was still pretty
Right.
strong at the time. And so it was very refreshing to experience that, like maybe not at its peak, but it was still pretty relevant in everywhere that you went. Not as much as today, unfortunately. And so I really wanted to use music to step outside of the box like that. And yes, when I premiered that piece with the 90 player guitar orchestra, a lot of the players actually came up to me and asked me that question. They said, do you listen to heavy metal? Are you a metal fan? You listen to a lot of rock music, don't you?
Right.
And I was like, yes, I do sometimes.
Right.
And and yeah, so Guitar 4 is pretty riff-like, but it also echoes rock music in that traditionally the bass lines in heavy metal will often carry the
Right.
melody. The guitar is usually the rhythmic harmony, and the only time it really gets the spotlight is on the guitar
Right.
solo. And then it switches back to echoing the bass line or echoing like whatever riff is going on there. And I've kind of ended up putting that in Koi Out to Sea. So I can see where people automatically think of rock music there. But yeah, Koi Out to Sea, I was very inspired by how Austin was so calm and peaceful and yet so busy at the same time. And it still is. I can be on the trail downtown, right on the lake or the river, and forget that I'm even in a really big city. But all I have to do is climb up a set of stairs, and then there's crazy traffic and a lot of pedestrians everywhere.
Right.
And I remember when my classmates and I were performing for the Guitars Galore Festival. I believe it was 2012 or 2013 for Austin Classical Guitar. We traveled to Austin, and I remembered sitting there and thinking, like, man, this is like a koi fish almost. Like, because people think of koi fish as like really serene, tranquil, peaceful. People use them in meditations, like think of a koi fish kind of recordings. And then there's also like the legend of koi swimming upstream and turning into a dragon. And then there's also, have you ever seen a koi pond? They're just rushing everywhere. Like, where do we get this idea that they're serene to begin with? That's literally what I thought of Austin at the time. It's so peaceful, but really it's not. It can seem both, and yet they're both calm and busy, and yet neither at the same time. And I think what sealed the deal for me was after performing that Guitars Galore Festival, my classmates and I went to a Japanese restaurant, and it was called Zen. And they had kind of like this window decoration in the window, and it had koi fish in it. And I thought I took it as a sign. I was like, if I'm gonna write a piece, it's gonna be about koi fish. And that's it. That's it for me. That was my sign that it's gonna
Wonderful.
happen, and I'm gonna focus on that.
Wonderful.
Oh, that is fantastic. And Koi Out to Sea was copyrighted by the U.S. Library of Congress in May of 2013. And can you tell us about the process and the impact that that has made on your compositions in your career?
I don't get that question often, so I really had to think about it. The US Library of Congress is imperative for anyone in any division of art, I believe. If you're in visual arts, if you're in music, if you're in anything tangible, they should really invest some time into considering copyright of their work. And the reason why is because the Copyright Office is part of the US Library of Congress. And so it's the only way to officially register a copyright for your creations. So even if your pieces and your artwork or your music or your poetry or short stories, whatever you create has protection, it's not really necessary to have a copyright with the US Library of Congress, but it gives it more protection. In a way, it's able to say, like, this is legally mine. So you can't print it and then sell it saying that it's yours, because then I can be able to legally do something about it. And without it, it would be very difficult because it would be harder to prove that, yes, it is mine. And so I wanted to make sure that I could be protected that way, but also because I had decided at the time that I wanted to be a self-publisher, and it gives the exclusive rights to be able to make copies of your own pieces, sell or distribute them, and actually even perform them or give permission for others to perform them and or display it. Being able to have that ownership and be able to say, this is mine, and yes, I give permission, which most people don't realize. In a world today, especially when things can be so easily replicated, with technology becoming more and more advanced, it's definitely something that people should consider looking into to make sure that their ownership of what they've created has a little bit more protection than usual.
100%.
Mhm,
Here is a
absolutely.
live recording of the Kitchener-Waterloo Guitar Orchestra performing Kristina Avila's piece, Coy Out to Sea, for guitar orchestra.
from a recent online concert that was a live recording of the Kitchener-Waterloo Guitar Orchestra performing Kristina Avila's piece Koi Out to Sea for guitar orchestra. This is the Classical Guitar Heroines podcast. La Isla, which you composed for guitar quartet, incorporates several rhythmic and percussive elements, including claves, golpe, and hand clapping. Can you tell us about the significance of La Isla and this piece's Latin elements?
So La Isla in Spanish means the island. I am originally from the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, which is right on the border of Mexico and on the Gulf of Mexico. So it's a short drive away from South Padre Island, which is right there on the border as well. And so anyone who grows up in the valley usually automatically knows, like, yes, South Padre Island, we go there all the time. And it's kind of like a retreat just being near the ocean. And so it's impossible to not be there or make that part of your home if you're growing up in the valley. So my piece is a tribute sort of to South Padre Island. And I wanted it to have the Latino music that you hear around you everywhere there and in my hometown and where I grew up, because it wouldn't make sense to write about South Padre Island without them and those Latino influences. So there's a lot of like rhythmic flavor to the music around you there, especially with whatever makes up the music that you hear a lot down there, which is like Tejano music, which is a mix of cumbias, which originally is like from Colombia, and then you have like Mexican music styles, and then like, believe it or not, most people don't know this, but actually European polkas influence it. And it created its own ensemble as it evolved, which means like now it has four main instruments. You know, it has like the accordion, the bajo sexto, like some sort of bass instrument like the electric bass, or just, you know, the bajo sexto, and then a drum set. And so you hear this everywhere. And I wanted it to have that vibe and have that influence in the piece, especially like with the son clave, which you hear all the time. And all the time, everywhere. I'm actually amazed being so far away in Austin from the valley, how much I don't hear it anymore. I wanted it to echo what I constantly heard. And the hand clapping I felt was essential because it's the first thing that people do other than dancing when the music is around. They're either snapping their fingers, they start clapping, or they just start dancing. You see it all the time. And this happens in a restaurant or especially at parties and even on the beach. It's almost like life is a party there. As long as there's music, everything around you just gives into it. And I wanted to have that in that piece as kind of like a tribute to that area and that influence there.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I'm wondering too, as a composer, because you've been kind of talking about all these rhythmic elements, how important is rhythm to you compared to, say, a melody?
It's really important, but I think it's equally as important as melody. It's really hard for me to think of one without the other, actually. So as much as I love rhythm, melody is what makes it a little bit more spontaneous and less predictable. But it also sets the tone and the mood, while the other just influences the overall energy. Syncopation, for example, like those claves, automatically make you feel drawn in and change the energy right from when you hear it. And it gives you like a groove that you're already feeling within yourself. But when you add the melody, even if it's like in quarter notes, it starts shaping it into what it's going to become. And that starts driving it into what you're going to create down the line. So in my mind, I think of like rhythm creates the energy, but melody creates the mood. And so they kind of like go hand in hand in trying to see like, how are we going to move forward from the beginning? And is it going to be more important, the energy, or is it going to be the mood? And you kind of think about those things as you write, or at least I do. I don't know how anyone else does, but that's what I think of. So I kind of think of them both, like immediately when I try to imagine a theme. Is it going to reflect something moody and I want the melody to be more important? Or is it going to be something a little bit more groovy like La Isla? So then it's going to be the syncopation or the rhythm patterns that are going to be more important.
And can you tell us about the South Padre Island Rescue Sea Turtle Group and why you're donating the profits from La Isla to them?
In 2019, changes were made by that administration at the time to the Endangered Species Act. And one of the main focuses that they were doing was removing certain protections from certain species. And one of them was the sea turtles were not going to be protected anymore. And it affected me because I immediately thought of like, this seems a little bit personal. It's because these are at home. That's what came to my mind. And the sea turtles that live in the waters in the Gulf near South Padre Island, like the green sea turtle or like the loggerheads, those were going to be some of the ones that were affected to the news articles that I was reading. And even if, like Sea Turtle Inc. wasn't going to be directly funded or receiving government grants anymore, I felt like it was something that I personally could do to kind of help or give back in some way. I thought, what better way than the piece that's actually about where they are or where they're from. Whenever anyone gives a donation or purchases my piece, I immediately donate it and then send them the receipt that it didn't go to me. It went to Sea Turtles Inc.
That's a wonderful thing to do. You're giving back to, the environment, and you're also having fun playing your music at the same time. I love that. We will listen to another live concert recording of the Kitchener-Waterloo Guitar Orchestra performing La Isla for guitar orchestra, composed by Kristina Avila.
From their recent online concert, that was a live recording of the Kitchener-Waterloo Guitar Orchestra performing La Isla for Guitar Orchestra, composed by Kristina Avila. This is the Classical Guitar Heroines podcast. You were asked by the duo Tenebroso to compose a piece of music for them, and you created Destination Dublin, which is my favorite piece to play as part of the KW Guitar Orchestra because of the tambour portion at the end. Tell us about your experience working with the duo Tenebroso and your process for developing this composition.
Oh, that was so much fun. They're such lovely people, and we connected as friends on Facebook. And right from the beginning, when they asked me, they said that I could have free reign, meaning I had no limitations. Like, so they gave me no suggestions on anything, no ideas, no themes, no style, no duration, which was really freeing, but also very scary
Sure.
at the same time, because I wasn't sure if whatever idea I came up with or whatever I was going to create, they were going to like, if it was going to meet their criteria or whatever they were looking for. At that moment in time, personally, I was heavily interested in reading a lot about Irish folklore and legends and dwelling on my yearning for wanting to go there, to go to Ireland.
Right.
And it kind of spiraled out of control there. It started with books and then with documentaries, and then I was listening to a lot of Celtic music, and I just remember listening on repeat to David Russell's Celtic album. I think it's Messages of the Sea. From there, I also started researching and became interested in what the main instruments of Celtic music are, especially because the legends and figures that I was reading about playing the instruments that are actually still used today in Ireland when they perform pieces or just play music in general. And so using that as my inspiration, it became my theme. I presented these ideas to them by talking to them about these curiosities, and thankfully they liked it and that I was going to expand on this. So I would send them like screenshots of my finale program, like this is kind of what I'm going with, and hopefully it develops into something that you like, but it's definitely gonna have a lot of Ireland in there. And sure enough, they liked it, and I was very thankful for that because they were very happy with how it turned out, and it was very fun going back and forth with them on it. But there was also a lot of jokes about drinking Guinness, and I think that was my favorite part.
That's wonderful. Here is Duo Tenebroso performing Destination Dublin, composed by our guest, Kristina Avila.
That was the guitar Duo Tenebroso, performing Destination Dublin, composed by Kristina Avila. You are listening to the Classical Guitar Heroines podcast. So, Kristina, musically, what's next for you? What are you working on now?
Working on so many things. This is why we need extra hours in the day.
Agreed. Agreed.
I've been asked by Austin Classical Guitar to compose some pieces for their guitar curriculum.
Fantastic.
But yeah, which I feel is really, really interesting because they also were like, you could basically have free reign here and choose for any level.
Nice.
And which is
Nice.
also a little bit scary because I'm trying to also figure out what are they going to like and what level is it going to be too hard or is it going to be too easy? Where is this going to fit in? But it's exciting, and I'm also still trying to work on pieces that I've been working on for years. They've taken me longer, I think, because I have so very high standards on myself that on these particular pieces they're just taking longer than they usually would. And so hopefully I can finish those sometime in the near future. But other than that, I've also been for about the past 2.5 to almost 3 years doing a fairly large research project, which is researching into the Chevalier de Saint Georges.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so if no one's ever heard of him before, you wouldn't be alone, unfortunately. But that's the point. I genuinely believe he needs more recognition. And the main reason is because, unfortunately, people refer to him as the Black Mozart. And
Mm.
that is all kinds of wrong, especially because, like, he was born in 1745, Mozart was born in 1756. So there's like an 11-year age difference there. And by the time he was actually trying to find patronage, Mozart, and still find commissions and work and relying on his own father's income, Chevalier was already in Marie Antoinette's social circles and conducting and writing pieces long before Mozart had a chance to or got recognition to. I think it's important to not only know about him, the main reason why I'm researching into him is because there is some information that I've come across that has led me to believe that he's written guitar music,
Really?
really.
Oh,
Oh my
amazing.
gosh.
And so this would be something, one, that Mozart didn't do,
Yeah, true.
Mm.
and two, it would be really imperative for the guitar community
Mm.
to know, like, someone classically who is on the same level as Mozart or above, however you want to think of him as far as levels and caliber, actually did write at the time for guitar music. Like, it wasn't just seen as a secular instrument that was put on the side. It was actually being thought of as a classical instrument to have pieces and sonatas written for. And so I've been able to find at least one document. What I'm trying to do is prove it
Mm.
and prove that it was his. I've been collaborating and discussing this with two professors and scholars that study Chevalier a lot, or Joseph Vallone, that's his name, his actual
Mm.
name. And they're helping me do this. But it's also really hard and dissertation level research.
Mm.
The one that I do have, if I can further prove it and discuss, like, yes, he did do this, my plan is to record it and write it. And I have been asked by Soundboard Magazine, like, you should write about this. We need to know.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I'm just kind of like, well, I'm slowly trying to prove it. And it's really hard because I don't live in France.
Yeah, yeah.
So I've been working on those things at the same time while doing a lot of teaching privately around the city of Austin. So that's what's in the future still for me.
Wonderful.
It's so wonderful to hear about all the stuff that you're doing. And how can our listeners find out more about you and your work?
I'm trying harder to keep my website up to date. It used to be that I had a lot of followers on Twitter, and I don't really have public social media. So I try really hard to keep that up to date and keep the news portion of it up to date with whatever information I find on my pieces or whatever events have come up. So I really try hard to keep that up to date with as much recent information as possible.
Thank you, Christina, for joining us today. A big thank you to the wonderful Kristina Avila for being our guest on this episode. And a big thank you to Kristen Walagora and the Duo Tenebroso for allowing us to use their recordings. We would also like to thank the Kitchener-Waterloo Guitar Orchestra for allowing us to use their beautiful recordings of Kristina's work.
This episode was recorded in May of 2025, and we were saddened to learn of the guitarist Lisa Herlong's recent passing last month. She was a celebrated classical guitarist and internationally respected broker of both Spanish horses and fine guitars, and Lisa passed away on April 9th, 2025 in Granada, Spain. She was born in Arden, Delaware, USA, and made her home in Granada, where she lived a life steeped in music, tradition, and cultural exchange. Lisa studied under the legendary Andre Segovia. Her artistry and deep reverence for classical guitar music brought her acclaim not only as a performer, but also as a passionate advocate for the heritage of the guitar and mentor to young musicians around the world. In addition to her musical pursuits, Lisa played a pivotal role in connecting the world to Andalusian culture as both a broker of Spanish horses and handcrafted guitars. Her discerning eye and genuine love for the craft earned her the trust of artists, collectors, and equestrians around the globe. Here is Lisa Herlong performing the iconic Fernando Sor study, Exercise 22, Opus 35, number 22.
Follow the Classical Guitar Heroines podcast on Facebook, Instagram, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud. If you enjoyed what you heard, please click the like button and don't forget to subscribe to our Substack newsletter for updates. If you love our podcast and want to support us, consider visiting our Ko-fi account. You can find the link on our Facebook and Instagram pages. Every contribution, no matter the amount, helps us to stay independent and to keep the podcast accessible to everyone. And remember, if you are a woman who plays classical guitar, you too are a classical guitar heroine. Thank you for joining us on the Classical Guitar Heroines podcast.